maybe only one.
All right, well, with us today, we have some dietitians from Unit 5 School District here in Normal. So to start with, we will start with introductions. I know these three, but the class does not. So if you would share your educational background and how you got involved with school food service.
Sure. I'm Joanna. I am the Director of Food and Nutrition Services at Unit 5 Schools. My educational background is I completed both my bachelor and master's degrees at Illinois State University. I was a graduate for undergrad in 2006, and then I completed the graduate program in 2008. I had a long road to get to school nutrition. I did a variety of other career options in dietetics, and I took the position in school nutrition in 2019 here at Unit 5.
Great, thank you.
Now, I'm Angela. I'm the assistant director. My background was in a completely different field initially, and then decided to do a career switch and finished my undergraduate and graduate program at ISU as well. And I finished in 2013, at which point this position was open with Unit 5, and I kind of slipped right in, and I've been here ever since.
And I'm Jen Morton, and I am the most recent graduate of ISU. I did my undergrad at Ohio University and then went over to ISU and just graduated last year. And I actually did my internship with Unit 5 last summer and then applied for the job here as the food procurement specialist. So I do a lot of ordering and how I ended up here.
Great, thank you. Well, Joanna, we all come with different backgrounds in school food service. When we think back to our own elementary, junior high, and high school, school lunch that we had, if you could give us a basic overview to kind of lay out what Unit 5 is, as far as how many schools are you serving at, and if you have an average meal number as far as school lunches and breakfasts are concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. At Unit 5 School District, for food service, we have employees at 23 different schools. There is 17 early learning and elementary schools. There are 4 junior high schools, and we have 2 high schools in our district. The school total enrollment is approximately 13,000 students per year. On average, we serve anywhere between 6,500 and 7,500 school lunches per day, and then approximately 1,500 to 2,000 school breakfasts per day. Obviously, this fluctuates depending on menu items, and also it was completely different last year, but this year, since we're in person and back, we're seeing more familiar numbers to what it was prior to the COVID pandemic.
Sure, great. Yes, I know my kids' favorite meals and those that they're a little hesitant. So I can tell how those meal numbers might go up or down depending. That's interesting.
Yes.
So I know all three of you, although you have the nutrition background, you all serve a different role for Unit 5 food service. So if we could start, and we'll start with Joanna again, and describe your specific role and maybe what your responsibilities are with Unit 5.
So as the food service director, I wear many hats. Obviously, the biggest part I would say is a lot of the business aspects related to keeping the operations going. This could be any type of like budgeting, bill paying and approving, hiring with HR, staffing hours, schedules, trying to think of like more businessy aspects. But anything related to the operational business aspect is definitely a task that would be on my plate. Also, I work in conjunction with Angela for a lot of the menu development, any type of food product that we offer, definitely has approved and ran through me. Gosh, I feel like forgetting something in regards to like menu and nutritional things, but it seems so simple when you say it like that. But my biggest hat right now this year is probably not even, well, it is related to nutrition, but definitely a lot of HR scheduling and bills and budgeting would be my biggest category, because although I have a lot of responsibility with the nutritional aspects and like decisions related to whether how our program will run, for example, and we'll discuss this later, but last year we were serving everything. This year we're back to offer versus serve. All of those decisions are made with starting with me, and then they trickle down to how we then disseminate our jobs. So yes. Am I leaving anything out? And I'm sure I'm leaving a million things out. I like to think of myself as the chaos coordinator. But no, a lot of staffing, HR, that definitely is on my plate. Even looking into like a big topic or a big terminology word with food service is meals per labor hour. So then reviewing staffing and just making sure that we're not overstaffed or understaffed, and if so, adjusting schedules based on that. That takes up a lot of time, especially when you're looking at 23 schools. So.
Thank you. And Angela?
So as Joanna said, she and I kind of work in conjunction with the menu planning once she's kind of set the direction of, what we're going to do at each level. And then I kind of take that and take a little further, and we work together to figure out which products that we're using and put all of that into our back of house software for the menu planning portion, and kind of from then communicate all of that information out to our staff via production records, menus for our families to use, getting it posted on our website. And then my focus is, as far as operationally, is I work with the elementary schools and early learning schools a lot to just make sure they're following proper procedures, protocols, answering any questions that might come up. So I have a liaison between our managers and Joanna, so I can filter a lot of things out, and then obviously everybody's have to kind of go up to her for decision making, or it's a personal issue. And I also communicate with the nurses if we're having to make no substitutions or changes, getting in differences in the card counts, and things with allergens. We just started posting that on the website this year, and it's kind of a big job to get that set up and keep up with it, but I think families are appreciating it. Yes. And then I also liaise with Jenny on what products we're using, and again, if there's any issues that folks are having, that I can help kind of intercede and get them an answer on.
Thank you. And Jenny, I know you've recently started there, but if you want to share how your job position is designed.
Yeah, so I am the food procurement specialist, and so I work with a lot of distribution of the food. So I communicate a lot with all of the different managers from the schools and make sure that their orders, they basically kind of turn in their orders to me, and then I put in orders through one of our distributors, GFS, and really just work to make sure that everybody has what they need for the school year and for the menu days. And then I do a lot of communication with the warehouse workers in the back to make sure that if we're sending anything out through our warehouse here, that they are sending it out to the schools at the right times and the right place. It's a lot of logistics and communication. And then COVID has really changed things this year because a lot of our distribution has been finicky with everything being out from the manufacturer side, which has trickled down to being able to get things. So we've been working a lot, really all three of us, on substitutions and finding things last minute to make sure that they have the kids are still getting the food that they need.
Yeah, and the nutrients on the menu. Yeah.
A lot of changes.
Great. Well, thank you. I know it takes a village, and you are all a great example of that, how you divide out all those duties, but yet you work together as well. So thank you for sharing that. In class, previously, we learned about federally funded programs, and specifically the National School Lunch Program, Breakfast Program, we're all included on that list as well. So if, I don't know, Joanna or whoever wants to tackle this question regarding a more specific overview of the National School Lunch Program and thinking about those nutrition guidelines, the components of the meal. I know you mentioned offer versus serve as well, so explaining that.
So with child nutrition programs, first and foremost, they are federally funded from the United States Department of Agriculture. And normally during a school year, if a school district is in any type of child nutrition program, most commonly they are the school breakfast program and the National School Lunch Program. So we use acronyms. We usually say SBP and NSLP. So National School Lunch Program and then School Breakfast Program. But anyways, for the National School Lunch Program, there are many nutrition guidelines and meal pattern guidelines that we have to abide by in order to receive funding from the USDA. So how the funding works, I think that's important to understand. Basically what happens is we are serving a meal that we are assuring is compliant to a reimbursable meal in the definition of the USDA. So then we count those meals, and the total number of meals that we serve that would count for a reimbursable meal, we submit a total claim and we receive a certain dollar amount reimbursement per meal that we're submitting to the USDA. For the meal patterns, they are very specific. If we think of nutrition and what we've learned, usually it's like the like My Plate, or like the old food pyramid, or just different, what am I trying to say, like just any type of food groups that we've learned. School nutrition programs think of them a little differently, and it's always interesting when interns come on site, they always make a comment about how they think of our food groups as protein, grain, what we learn in nutrition class: protein, grain, dairy, fruit, vegetable, oils, fats. Those are our different food groups that we think of. Now in school nutrition, for the National School Lunch Program, we have to think of the food groups in terms of grain, meat or meat alternate, vegetable, fruit, and milk. So obviously a lot of times it's very confusing for interns to come on site and they're like, well, where is fat fit into this? Or where does dairy fit into it? And obviously we go over that. Dairy most falls under like meat or meat alternate unless it's milk. Milk is its own separate category. They don't have an area for like a fat food group. It's just we are required to stay under a certain total fat per day, and then no more than 10% of our fat calories can be of saturated fat. And then we are not allowed to have any trans fat in our meals. So that's kind of where the fat food group falls into, is just under a specific guideline. So again, going back to our 5 food groups in school nutrition, we have meat, meat alternate, grain, fruit, vegetable, and milk. Now, when we're talking about serve and offer versus serve, in a serve school, students would receive all 5 of those components or food groups every single day with their meal. At our school, our application with the USDA is offer versus serve, and that means that students have to choose at least 3 of those components or food groups for school nutrition out of the 5, and at least one of those 3 components on their trays has to be a fruit or a vegetable. Does that make sense to
Yeah.
you, Julie? Okay, so students, so a typical menu for um for our school, usually the entree would include the components of grain and meat or meat alternate. So for example, cheese pizza is a menu item that we frequently serve. So let's say the menu of the day would be your cheese pizza. That cheese pizza would be the grain and the meat alternate component. So right there, that food item counts as two components. So then if a student wants to take, a milk, a lot of students drink chocolate milk, they would take a chocolate milk. Right there, they have three components. However, that doesn't count as a reimbursable meal because one of the required three components is a fruit or a vegetable. So in order for that meal to be reimbursable, the student needs to then take either a fruit or a vegetable. At the junior high schools, we also have juice on the menu every day. We don't for the elementary students except for at breakfast, but at junior high school, they could take a juice also, and that could count as like a fruit for lunch as well. But yes, they would have to take three components. One of the three components has to be a fruit or a vegetable. A common misconception at a lot of schools, and even though it's in our district, is that children have to take milk. They don't have to take milk. That's not a required component. It's just that fruit or vegetable and then two other components. With offer versus to serve, students can take all five components if they want as well. But the minimum has to be three with a fruit or a vegetable. Are we leaving anything out, Angela?
Maybe talk a little bit more about funding and other sources of funding.
So in reference to like reimbursement rates or
Money we get for commodities.
okay, that's a good, yes. So with the National School Lunch Program, more in the realm of like money that we receive from the government is every year around the time of February, it's would be Jenny, Angela, and I, we would sit down and we are given money from the government that we can use towards fresh fruits and vegetable produce. This is called DOD, or the Fresh Fruits and Vegetable Department of Defense. Thank you. That's what I'm trying to think of. I'm like, why can I not think of the DOD acronym right now?
It doesn't really make sense.
No, I know. So the DOD is fresh fruits and vegetable money. We allocate about $80,000 from our district into fresh fruits and vegetables. That is additional money that the government is giving us outside of the reimbursable meal claims. Also, with commodity dollars, there is a diversion to processor commodity funding program. And basically what that means is that we can choose different amounts of pounds from certain type of manufacturers or vendors. And we can say that we want to allocate so many pounds of chicken from, like, for example, Tyson. And then basically what happens is they give those pounds are attributed to a dollar amount. That dollar amount then reduces the price per case that we would pay for the chicken that we're purchasing from our distributor, which is Gordon Foodservice, or GFS, as Jenny had mentioned. So the Department of Defense, the DOD, is fresh fruits and vegetables. Then there's diversion to processor. And again, that's taking like products that we need, allocating a pound amount to it, and then getting a certain price off per case for that diversion to processor. And then the third thing is that the USDA has another program. It's Illinois calls it their lantern distributions, but it's PAL dollars. And basically the lantern or PAL money that we receive is for items that aren't fresh. It can be a lot of canned or cupped food items. It can be frozen products such as like grilled chicken breasts, but I mean, they have USDA foods then that we receive on a monthly delivery cycle if we sign up for any type of Pell dollars through the USDA food program too. So that is on top of the reimbursements. That's additional money towards our food costs on top of the reimbursements we receive for serving a reimbursable meal. A lot of times when interns come in and do their rotation, that is a very confusing point. And I think Jenny finally started to realize how all of the pieces came together when she started working with that procurement piece, because some of that is like a special delivery. Like I said, a monthly special delivery is what the USDA is sending on our van turn deliveries. Some of it is coming from a different distributor altogether. Our DoD, or Department of Defense, fresh fruits and vegetables comes from Central Illinois Produce. So that's a completely different vendor, but essentially it's, like I said, free money to us for fresh fruits and vegetables. And then the diversion to processor money that we receive is actually something that our distributor, GFS, receives from the Illinois commodity system. And then they just input that into their system. So then whenever we purchase it, that money is just taken off the case of products that we're purchasing if we have commodity dollars in that product.
Yeah, I can see where this is confusing when you're getting money from all these different places to then serve the food. So thank you for doing that. So the next question I had was relating to breakfast. For all the funding is similar, but if you could explain what are the components that make up a school breakfast meal?
Sure, absolutely. And for school breakfast, it is actually not components. It's different. We call those items. So for school breakfast, we offer 4 items daily, and the students have to take, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank, 3 items. The students have to take, I know it is like a pop quiz. The students have to take 3 items daily. So for example, on our menu, typically we have it's a grain entree, or it's a grain, that's 1 item. And then we usually have juice, that's considered an item. We have milk, that's considered an item. And then we have some type of fruit, like that's not in juice form. So a lot of times it could be like applesauce. We do a lot of cupped fruit in the morning just because of staffing and schedules and their arrival. So a lot of times in the morning we offer a cupped or canned fruit option, juice, a grain option, or cereal, and milk. And then students have to choose 3 of the 4 items to make a meal. One has to be what? And one has to be a fruit. So students can't just come up with like cereal and milk. Not that that would, and the other grain option, that wouldn't come as a meal. They have to have that juice or that fruit cup. So you can also serve protein. The year, obviously in 2019, we were serving yogurt as like an alternate option. And so that could replace the grain in the morning. If they didn't want a grain, they could get like yogurt, a fruit, and milk, and then that could be their meat alternate to replace the grain. Because remember, yogurt is not dairy. It is a meat alternate. So it is very different than just the traditional way of thinking of one carbohydrate is 15 grams. We don't think like that in school nutrition. We think in ounce equivalents. So everything is like a grain is an ounce equivalent rather than a carb equivalent. So very different than your traditional diabetes exchange.
I know Unit 5 also does summer feeding.
Mhm.
And this has evolved over the years. Of course, the past couple of years have probably been different than in the past. But if you want to share a little bit about your summer feeding program, how many locations you have. I know you also do buses as well, I think, in the summer.
Yeah,
Which is great.
sure. So this our summer feeding program before 2019 versus after 2019 has changed drastically. I'm not certain yet what this next summer will look like, but I can definitely tell you what it was before 2019 and then since the pandemic has started. So in 2019 or before, and Angela might have to help me because that's also the year I started. Typically, we would serve breakfast at any location where summer school was being hosted. So for example, Cedar Ridge is a school that's in South Bloomington. That's one in our district. Typically that's a summer school site. And so what our food service program was required to do was serve either breakfast or lunch. Because summer school timing wasn't like a full day thing, it was most convenient to ensure that we were serving students the breakfast. It's also the easiest to prepare as well. So that kind of helped with staffing because our staff does not work in the summertime. It's all extra hours that they do come in. So for staffing purposes and everything in the summer at a school site, that was a summer school site, we would just serve breakfast that day. There are other sites though in town, such as there was a camp, it's called the Unity Center. At the Unity Center, they held a camp, and then for that site specifically, we would serve lunch to those students. Lunch in 2019 was the traditional summer food service program, meaning that students had to actually come to the camp and we had certain serving times that we were required to serve the meals. They were not allowed just to be handed out and taken off site. So that was before 2019 or 2019, I guess I should say before 2020. Back then our summer program was not very big. I think we were lucky to do maybe 1,000 breakfast and lunch and or lunch meals for the whole year. It was a very small program. After the pandemic, in March of 2020, that drastically changed things. The USDA had a lot of waivers and flexibilities that they offered to school food service associations. And those waivers included flexibilities for meal patterns, which we really didn't use. We tried to stick to the healthy nutrition guidelines and meal patterns. They had waivers regarding non-congregate eating. So meaning that in the past, the summer food service program had to eat on site at that specific meal serving time. So with the non-congregate waiver, students could take their food off site. They didn't have to eat it on site. There was meal time flexibilities. So that meant that we didn't have to serve at your traditional breakfast time or your traditional lunch time. You could serve the meal at 10 a.m. and it could be a breakfast and a lunch meal that you were serving for that meal flexibility. Also, because of the pandemic, another waiver and flexibility was that parents and or guardians could pick up the meal. In the past, it was required that the student was the only one that would pick up the meal. For the summer program, we don't have to collect names or eligibility status. I'll touch on eligibility here in just a minute, Julie, because that's another important aspect to our program. But we didn't have to touch on eligibility status, so we didn't have to collect names. So we just had to count a number, but it had to be a child that was 18 years or younger for the program that was getting that meal. Again, last year, because of the waiver, parents could pick up that meal, or guardians or neighbors even could pick up the meal as long as it was going to feed a child that was 18 years old or younger or attending a public school. So that drastically changed our summer program, hence the development of what we call meal kits and also the delivery service. So obviously with the pandemic, initially we were all told to shelter in place. So we were trying to accommodate as many families, abiding to that executive order. So that's why we use our transportation department. We developed a process to package meals into containers that contained, it would contain 1 day's worth of their food. And then we would put maybe 3 days worth of these containers into a bag and then go out to different communities in the Bloomington, in different neighborhoods in the Bloomington normal community. And we have delivery times. We announced those delivery times on our district website, and families would come to a delivery stop and pick up these meal kits that we were distributing. So food service went from obviously students going through a cafeteria line to an assembly process to put together and then taken to neighborhoods to deliver. So, what was that, Julie? I couldn't hear you.
Right, I can't imagine like just the change for your staff to now prepare those meals to go.
Yes, yeah, it was a lot of planning and a lot of trial and error for the best way to go about that. You know, because if you're running late in the kitchen, you know, you can continue to prep as students are coming through the line. If you're running late when a bus is leaving, you have to, you know, obviously that's not an option, I guess we'll say. That was not an option. So it was definitely a lot of trial by error to make sure that we were getting enough food onto the buses to make sure that we had food for everybody in the community who needed it during the summer food service program. And then last year, because we were in different models, just like you guys, of learning, some were virtual, sometimes we were hybrid, where we were in person and virtual. And then finally, by the end of the year, I think everybody was in some form of in-person, except for the secondary schools did still have a Wednesday hybrid day. But it was really working through all those different learning models and trying to provide the food for in-person and also any student who was fully remote, any student who was hybrid. So even as the high school students came back in April, we were still doing hybrid meals for their Wednesday learning, and we were still doing fully remote curbside meal distribution for any family that was fully remote.
That's lots of planning. How did your summer feeding numbers change from like 2019 to
Yes.
half summer 2021?
Great question. So obviously in 2019, our whole program, like I said, we served approximately 1,000 meals per summer. In 2020 and last summer, 2021, I want to say we were serving roughly, last summer we were serving about 1,000 per day. So yeah, so they went up drastically. The summer before, I want to say it was around 1,400. So there was more of a demand in summer of 2020 versus summer of 2021. But yeah, we were still serving roughly 1,000 this past summer per day.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Good.
So it did change. Now, I do want to go back really quick and touch on eligibility, because I think that is a really important part of the school nutrition program. And that also goes into like the federal reimbursement scheme of things. So there's a few ways to look at this. In normal school year, when we're running under the National School Lunch Program, we receive different amounts of reimbursement based on a student's eligibility. So students can submit, if their family has any type of assistance from the government, or if their family is a lower income family, or if the student is like a foster child, homeless, runaway, migrants, there's different categories. But if a student is one of those special groups, they can submit a household eligibility application to qualify for either free or reduced priced meals when they attend and purchase meals in school. So students for National School Lunch Program and for School Breakfast Program, to us, obviously they're very important and we don't differentiate, but they are labeled in our system as either paid, free, or reduced. Paid students obviously pay the full price for our meals. During normal times when meals are not free, the price for an elementary meal is $2.35. The price for a junior high or high school meal is $2.40. And the high school has a special like tiered level, because we tried to do the more fancier, I guess, or more expensive, we'll say, options of food for the high school. So there's a tier 2 level of pricing at the high school, and that's $3 for those meals. So students that are paid would pay the full price for those lunches. Breakfast is $1.50. I think this year I think we upped our price. I think it used to be $1.45, and now I think it's either $1.50 or $1.55. I apologize, I don't know that. All meals are free this year. But in a normal year, paid students would pay the $1.50 or $1.55 for their meal. For reduced price students, their lunch meals, no matter if they get an elementary lunch, a junior high lunch, a high school tier 1 or a high school tier 2 lunch, they're paying 40 cents for their lunch meal. Breakfast for a reduced student is 30 cents per meal. And then anybody who qualifies for free school meals is paying obviously $0 for their meal. And that's under the National School Lunch Program. Now, when we submit a reimbursement to the USDA for our meal claims, we have to report the number of claims the number of meals for paid students. The reimbursement then that the USDA gives us for paid meals is only 33 cents per meal because the student is paying the full cost for the meal. But the USDA gives us just a little bit of money in addition to that cost. Like I said, it's 33 cents. For a reduced price student, we're collecting obviously the 30 cents for breakfast or the 40 cents for lunch. And the USDA is reimbursing us, I think it was $3. And I just discussed this today with my intern that we have here. I'm drawing this link, but I think it was $3.11 for reimbursed meals for reduced price students. So then we tally up the number of students who are eligible for reduced, and then how many of them purchased a meal on the select days. And then we tally that up the total for the month, and the USDA gives us the reimbursement of $3.11 for that. For free students, we receive $3.51 reimbursement for their lunch meals. Our district in a normal year is about 33% free and reduced. So most of our funds are coming from paid students, and then we're just receiving that 33-cent reimbursement rate for most of those students. So in a normal school year, like I said, under National School Lunch Program, there is like a tiered reimbursement rate for paid free and reduced students. This year, due to the pandemic, we are operating in our early learning through 8th grade programs under a program that's also a child nutrition program from the USDA. It's called the Summer Seamless Option Program, and all meals are free under this program for students. So any meal reimbursement that we submit, the USDA is actually paying us a higher dollar amount for those meals. So we're receiving for all meals that are reimbursable meals, we're receiving $4 and approximately 32 cents this year for meal reimbursement. So we're getting a quite a bit larger reimbursement from the USDA this year for operating under the Summer Seamless option.
Well, thanks for sharing all that information. I know there's a lot to the reimbursement process, so thank you.
Yes.
My last question for all of you is, we learned a little bit about what your job is with Unit 5 Food Service, but if you can think about how has your job changed with COVID and the restrictions, and now I know you just shared with us these meals, but if you can share a little bit more about how your personal job changed.
Sure. Well, I guess I will go first. Oh gosh, COVID obviously changed the whole setup of school nutrition since meals were no longer offered in person initially. So really, with my team, because I couldn't have done it by myself, we had to really figure out how we were going to be able to distribute food to students in remote or virtual models. So a lot of, and the constant changing of the model. So Unit 5 initially announced that they were going to be in person. And then 2 weeks before school started, they announced it was going to be all virtual. So we were virtual for about 8 weeks. And then we did try hybrid for about 4 weeks. And then we changed back to virtual. And then finally, starting in January, we really went more to a hybrid and fully in-person model. That changed my job drastically because I was constantly changing schedules, where food was being served out of, redistributing food and pickups and making sure we were trying to be really conscious about not wasting food. Initially with the abrupt shutdown, we tried to use as much food as we could, but when you go from serving 7,000 meals a day to 2,000 to 3,000 meals in a couple of weeks, we did unfortunately lose a lot of inventory that year of 2020. So it was really coordinating schedules, logistics. I unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we've also dealt with a lot of labor and staffing shortages. So I have had to pick up a lot more of that hiring process and bringing employees in and marketing our positions and availability and working with HR to try to attract candidates to work in the school food service program. Trying to think what else this year with meals being free, we are seeing quite a bit more activity, at least initially. So it's really working through then labor hours and just making sure schools are fully staffed or have enough hours to meet the needs of the students who want to purchase. I say purchase, I guess I should say pick up their free meals. Yeah. So that has really put a lot of that HR process on why my job. I don't think Pat who was my predecessor. I think she focused on HR, but I don't think it was. I think she had a lot. I don't want to say a lot of time because it's still a busy position, but she had more time to focus on menu and other items with operation, whereas that has been operation management and like making sure the schools are still following procedures has kind of been falling to Angela and other associate managers. And what else would you say? During a pandemic, we also thought it would be great to change our nutrition software database program.
It was good timing in a way, because we had a lot less activity when the system was coming.
So that in and of itself also kind of changed the dynamic of Angela's job quite a bit. Because Angela's former job was in IT. It was like a natural progression for her to help us really implement and get going from the ground up. The nutrition software program change as well. Once we get it fully functioning, we think it's really going to help, but there have been some growing pains with that. And then in regards to Jenny's job, unfortunately, Jenny has come into school food service during a very difficult time. It has been extremely stressful, not only for her, but for myself, I think, because I don't know if outside worlds know this or not, but there is an extreme food and production shortage with manufacturers these days. So in 2019, we would go weeks without any type of notification from our distributor, Gordon Food Service, of any product shortages or outs. We could always get the foods that were on our menu. There was not really any issues with any type of distribution and receiving of food from, there was no food shortage issues really, I guess I should say. This year, I think we've had to reallocate our time to work with our distributor, sometimes an hour, sometimes 2 hours, just discussing what items they have in stock that are close to the nutrition, like the close in equivalence to nutritional composition for any type of substitutes, because we're not able to get our items because the food manufacturers have shorted our distributor, which then obviously puts us in chaos mode, I guess we'll say. So Jenny's job has been difficult because of that, I would say.
Been a lot of time that before, well, I haven't done the job before all the COVID hit, but it's been a lot of time allocated towards like finding substitutions, and because we have 23 schools too that all get direct deliveries, it's like going through each of their deliveries separately and seeing, okay, I put in these 8 orders yesterday. Let me look at all 8 of these orders today and write down, and it's just a lot of substituting because it's a lot of schools.
So we have, in the past, obviously, there has been a product that was out. We had substitutions for our products that we would then use next. It's been so bad that, you know, your substitutions are now out and you're looking for substitutions for substitutions.
Oh, frustrating.
Mhm.
Angela, anything else you want to share about how your job has changed?
I think it's just been a couple of years of just constant change. Like, you know, our previous director had been here for years. This was very like a well-oiled machine. Everybody knew the role, responsibility, how everything was done. And as soon as the pandemic hit, it was just like, forget everything you used to know, because in some ways we're almost starting from scratch with things we had never ever done before. So like Joanna said, it was a lot of collaboration amongst the team of trying to come up with a good plan and then figuring out how to communicate that out to the sites, to our staff, to help them feel comfortable, you know, getting through the whole process of what we're asking them to do. Like I said, it's something they've never done before. So I think our staff learned that they could do things they didn't think they could do, which is, you know, an interesting growth mindset kind of thing. But even this year, getting back to what we call normal has been another huge adjustment. So it's just a lot of constant like discussion, supervision, collaboration with people, much more than in the past where everyone's got 20 questions because they're not sure. And then as Joanna mentioned, just the implementation of the software, it was kind of good timing because we were slower, but at the same time, you know, it's just another new thing we threw in the mix.
Why not, right? One more thing.
One more thing.
I really appreciate all of your time today, but also just everything that you do. I know my kids eat school lunch every day, and you have the best hot dogs, apparently. Like, I cannot compare. So that's their favorite meal.
I'll give you a hint. You can probably find a similar hot dog at Sam's Club, but you'll probably buy like a 24 pack. So you'll be eating a lot of hot dogs.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, I appreciate your time. I'm going to stop the recording here.
Sure.